This episode has been generously sponsored by an anonymous donor. Hari Om and welcome to Living Ramayana, the podcast where we delve deep into the Ramayana and its significance for our lives today. I'm your host, Brahmacharini Shripriya Chaitanya, and today we are joined in the studio by Nikhil, one of our study group facilitators, who will be talking to us about the theme of today's episode. Before we get into that conversation, we are going to dive back into the story and pick up where we left off. So last episode, we left Kaikeyi and Dasharath Maharaj in the anger room, in the room of anger, where Kaikeyi was strewn across the floor. Dasharath Maharaj has collapsed in grief because Kaikeyi has asked for her two boons. One being for Bharata to be crowned king, which he very happily agreed to, but the second being for Shri Ram to be sent into exile for 14 years. And this is what causes Dasharath Maharaj's collapse. Now, the night has passed and Dasharath Maharaj has somehow spent the night sort of unconscious almost in his grief. And the usual procedure, especially because it's supposed to be the day of the coronation, is for his ministers to come and receive him in the morning and escort him to wherever he needs to go. So the chief minister, Sumantra, arrives at Dasharath Maharaj's palace and finds that it's empty. Usually the king is up and about before sunrise even, so he's known as being an early riser. And yet when Sumantra arrives there, he finds that Dasharath Maharaj is nowhere to be seen. So he goes to Kaikeyi's palace. And there, entering into this Kopa Bhavan, finds Dasharath Maharaj lying on the floor. And as soon as he sees this, of course, he knows that something has gone terribly wrong. And he approaches Dasharath Maharaj. He tries to find out. King Dasharath is unable to even articulate what has happened. Kaikeyi is still there. So she says to Sumantra, he's been lying on the ground the whole night. He just keeps saying, Ram, Ram. So I think you should bring Ram and find out what it is that's going on. She's not even willing to admit to him what has happened. Wants Rama to kind of arrive so that she can tell him what he has to do. Sumantra is a minister of the king, so he's not taking instructions from Kaikeyi, even though she's told him what to do. So he looks at Dasharath Maharaj, who sort of indicates as much as he can that that is what he wants. He wants Rama to be brought to him. Sumantra leaves and goes to Rama's palace. And Rama, of course, is ready. He's expecting to meet Dasharath Maharaj. But Sumantra sort of indicates that all is not as it should be. And therefore, he should come alone. So Sumantra escorts Shri Ram, and they arrive in Kaikeyi's palace to now have this conversation. Ram finds his father, on the ground, and he's immediately wanting to do whatever he can to correct the situation, to, do whatever he can to remove this sort of grief that he can see expressing on Dasharath Maharaj's face. But he's still not in a position to even kind of speak. He's so affected. He's so upset by what Kaikeyi has asked. And so Rama asks Kaikeyi that what's happened to my father? Kaikeyi at this point conveys the two boons that she's asked for. So she says, firstly, your father has said that Bharata should become king. Now, when Rama hears this, remember the very previous day, he's been told, you are going to be coronated tomorrow. On the day of his coronation, he comes to find that he's not going to be crowned king, but his brother is, Bharat. And actually, when he hears this news, he is really happy because he loves Bharat and he wants him to, be king as much as himself. And in the very next breath, Kaikeyi says, your father also wants you to go to the forest for 14 years. And as soon as Dasharath Maharaj hears this again, the fact that it's been, spoken aloud by Kaikeyi, he is again sort of inconsolable. And Rama looks at him, and it's really interesting. The reaction that he has is, but why are you so upset? Why are you unhappy that I get the opportunity to, one, fulfill your instructions and therefore fulfill my responsibility and fulfill my dharma to you as a son? And two, if I spend 14 years in the forest, I will have so many opportunities to meet all the kind of sages and hermits and ascetics who live in the forest and to be in their company and to learn from them. This is such a great opportunity. And his reaction is almost even more painful for Dasharath Maharaj because he's just reminded of how good Rama is in the fact that he's not in the least upset that he's being sent away for 14 years. And at the same time, it's so painful because Kaikeyi is, without even the least sort of amount of regret, very happily giving this instruction that you need to go and, go and live in the forest for 14 years. So for Dasharath Maharaj, it's painful on both sides. Kaikeyi is happy that she is getting what she wants, and Rama is absolutely equipoised. He is, his mind is completely balanced. There is not the least amount of sorrow, agitation, or anger, frustration at the fact that something he was promised is now being taken away from him. So now he's been told what he has to do. And he then takes leave of Dasharath Maharaj, who is still kind of not able to speak. And he says, before I go, I will go and meet my mother. And the one thing he says is, I will leave today, but before I leave, I will meet my mother. And in his mind, he's going alone. So he immediately goes to Kausalyaji's palace, to his mother's palace. And she's so happy to see him. So she's super excited. Today's the day of your coronation. I've been praying for you. You've come to take blessings. And Rama goes to her and he says the most beautiful thing. He says, "Oh, mother, father has given me the kingdom of the forest." The way that he breaks the news to her is done in such a way that will minimize her sorrow and will allow her to recognize that he's not affected by it. So instead of saying, oh my God, KK's just ruined everything and she's sending me away and, father is lying on the floor inconsolable, he says to her, I've been given the kingdom of the forest. In other words, I've been given another blessing, that I get to go and live in the forest for 14 years. Now, of course, Kausalyaji understands what this means, and she's also upset. She's also extremely sad that he'll be leaving. And her first reaction is, you don't need to go, right? And if you do need to go, then you need to take me with you. Don't just go by yourself. And he says, no, I must go. And I must go alone. Now we know that actually that's not what ends up happening, but how he is then accompanied by Lakshman and Sitaji, we will see next time. But two beautiful things to note in this particular episode of the story. One is the equanimity of mind that we see Shri Ram displaying. There is actually this really beautiful invocation in the Tulsi Ramayana, where Tulsidas Ji offers this prayer not to Rama, but actually to the glow of peace and balance in Rama's face. He says that cheerfulness, which neither increased when he was told he would be crowned, nor did it fade when he was told he would be exiled. The cheerfulness on that cheerfulness on Rama's face, may it be a blessing to me. In other words, invoking that sort of quality of balance and equipoise. So that's one thing. And the other thing that's so beautiful here is the way that Rama speaks when he reacts or when he responds to the news of his exile, and the way that he communicates to his mother when he says, I've been given the kingdom of the forest. Almost as though the way that he is perceiving it allows him to speak about it in such a positive way. But the fact that he can speak about it positively means it can also be experienced in a positive way. And everyone doesn't necessarily have to have that negative reaction to him being sent away, which they kind of still do. And we'll see that because it is really sad, but beautiful to note how these two things are shown. And one thing to think about for us each to reflect on is what helps us to stay balanced? What is it that you find in your life that helps you to maintain your balance when you're facing different situations and challenges? Nikhil, what do you think? What is it? What's something that helps you to stay balanced?
Balance, what an amazing topic. So what's helped me kind of find a way with balance? I think when I was reflecting and thinking about this topic from my own personal experience, when I was younger and I first heard about the topic of balance, it wasn't really a very inspiring thing that I really want to gain balance. I really want to be balanced. It seemed like quite a dry topic that requires you to, let go of things and not, and actually a lot of the people I looked up to and stories I'd heard were people who sort of seemed to live quite extreme lives. And in that extremity, they have achievement. And so actually I had a lot of questions about whether balance is actually even something that I want to achieve. And I think it was because I didn't have a proper understanding or definition of what balance is. And so for me, I think having thought about it and reflected on it, for me, balance is a critical component for us to achieve whatever we want to achieve. And actually, whilst we can maintain balance without necessarily having a specific goal or purpose that we're trying to achieve, I feel these two things really go hand in hand. Having a goal and a purpose and balance, they're really self-enforcing concepts. And the sort of visual imagery that was coming to me that was kind of reinforcing this was, was something which I'm sure we can all relate to, which is when you're trying to learn to ride a bike, and the hardest time to maintain balance is the start of the journey and kind of the end of the journey when you're not moving that fast and you haven't got that much momentum. But actually, when you've got that momentum, the balance becomes a lot easier and you can sort of start to act and so I think that metaphor for me is really, really helpful because I think, in a nutshell, I look forward to elaborating on this, but for me, the sort of, when that balance is there is when you have that combination of, intellectual clarity about what it is you're trying to achieve, linking that thing that you're trying to achieve with something that you actually care about. So you're not just driving there sort of in a dry way, but you're driving there because you want to drive there. And then once you've established that, then all the things that can push you off balance, all the sort of distractions or habits or extremities, lack of moderation that can come in, you're sort of more willing to sacrifice that stuff because you're heading towards an inspired goal. And so for me, what's helped, the moments in life when I've been very clear on what my goal is, why I'm intellectually pursuing it, why I care about it, then all the things that can cause you to lose balance become a lot easier to sort of ignore, and you can just focus on, pedaling and maintaining your balance. But when you lose that kind of connection, and then you can start to fall into kind of, old habits and things like that. So I think that's for me is probably where I'd start. But how about you? How would you think about for yourself in terms of achieving balance?
I think, what you said about it even being like an appealing thing to develop is so interesting, because you kind of, for example, if you think about who we look to as role models, like a sports person, someone who is kind of so much in the public eye when they're doing what we watch them for, and is really kind of exhibiting a lot of emotion, right? So you'll see these like euphoric reactions when they win, and equally like so much disappointment and stuff when they don't get the result that they're looking for. And those are the kind of people that we, a lot of people really look up to. And you think it's so much part of the journey, right? Like naturally, if you care so much about it, then you would be happy about winning and you would be sad about losing. But I think equally, you can see in them the point that you raised about like having a goal and having a purpose, because at the same time, that, as much as you may watch like a tennis match for, I don't know how long tennis matches go on for, like hours or whatever. But that like the rest of the year when they're training, they have to be so disciplined and be ready to give up whatever it is that's not going to be conducive to them, doing their best on the court.
Yeah.
So yeah, that idea of having a purpose that kind of draws you into your focus and helps you to ground yourself, I think is really important. I think, and for me also, that's one thing. And then I think just kind of always, whenever I find myself, losing my balance, it's often because I have lost perspective. And so I think just finding a way to just regain perspective is really important. Like, this thing is my whole world. And, wherever we are in any situation, that's our world. And so it becomes so important to us because it's everything right now. But then just reminding myself that, okay, there is a world outside this room. And, there are people who have lived lives for thousands of years before me. And there will be plenty of people after me. And there is so much else going on that actually what is there for me to be thrown off balance by?
Right.
And as much as it's important to me and therefore it is something I need to address, it's not the end of the world if things don't go my way. Right?
Yeah, interesting. And it's interesting that word you used, perspective. So when you lose balance, it's often when you lose sort of perspective. That perspective and knowledge are so closely linked, right? I guess. And so the thought kind of question that's coming into my mind is, for you, what role does Vedantic knowledge specifically play in helping one to maintain balance and perspective? Because, I can think of loads of examples in life of people who I can think of who are great examples of maintaining balance and achieving a lot, but don't necessarily have a kind of a Vedantic perspective. But also lots of examples of people who do and achieve balance in different ways.
Yeah.
So would love to hear your thoughts on the role of Vedantic knowledge in helping one to maintain balance.
Yeah. I think it is very true that even if we're not exposed to the philosophy of Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, that it's not that, you can't have balance without that understanding. But for me, I feel like it just takes you up to a point after which it's hard to maintain that perspective and maintain balance. Whereas for me, because I feel that Advaita kind of addresses everything about human experience and who we are and what the world is, there is no point at which, with reference to that, I can kind of lose sight of what it is that's important. It's just all encompassing in that way, in that it addresses kind of every single possible human experience.
Yeah.
And therefore there is no situation at which I am at a loss of how to maintain perspective, right? Whereas I feel like if, for example, my goal were limited, as long as I am in a situation where I can find the link to my goal, I'm okay. But if, for example, I'm thrown into an environment which is new and in which, there is no kind of way for me to link back to that purpose, then I'll be lost. So for me, that's the kind of value of Advaita, is that you always have a reference point and you then are never lost from being able to find that perspective.
Interesting. And it's so interesting as well that you used the example of sports earlier on for me, because as you know, I'm a huge sports fan, and I can really think of, it's quite quite vivid examples I can think of sports people who I've looked up to who have, I think, a wider perspective, and you can see that their ability to sort of manage the ups and downs sort of during their sporting career and even after is so much more advanced than people who don't have that wider perspective, and so they're really fully kind of going on that journey. And I think separating that that sort of distinction between, okay, my mind is going on this journey, but I'm actually not going on this journey, I think that's hugely valuable in terms of being able to maintain balance. The other thing about purpose that can sometimes bring out more inspiration to sort of maintain forward momentum and therefore balance, I've also found, is when that goal that we can tap into is something that's more expansive than ourselves. Because when distractions come in, the willingness to kind of give into those distractions is weakened when you're serving something that's not just for yourself but something greater than yourself. So yeah, in terms of balance, I think that would be something that I'd probably just add in terms of the Vedantic aspect, just that knowledge of helping connect and explain that actually, your role in society is linked with the whole of society, and actually trying to find and maintain that connection very much helps you maintain that motivation to maintain balance, rather than if you set goals which are just purely about yourself, and then you may feel like it's not that big of a deal if I don't achieve that goal.
Definitely. And I think that also is really brought out here in the story, because if we think about how Ram is able to maintain his equipoise in the face of all these different challenges, it's not necessarily because he's thinking of himself or his own goal. It is just because, if you look at it from the kind of scriptural religious perspective, then the purpose of his life is to demonstrate dharma, right? So in that sense, then you have the kind of that automatically being the criteria for everything that he does is going to be in line with dharma. But if you look at it from like the human standpoint, which like you very much find in the Valmiki Ramayana, is that he has like this personal commitment to that ideal that, you know, he wants to be doing the right thing. Like he wants to be doing his dharma. He wants to be fulfilling his responsibility. And therefore, it helps him to kind of, just perspective, right? And to navigate those decisions that have to be made, because that's the benchmark, right? It's always like, okay, what's the ideal? I'm going to go for that. Not, okay, what's the ideal? But equally, like, what do I want to do? And how do I find like a middle point in between? Which is, I feel like for most of us, what happens, right?
Yeah.
There's like, okay, what do I want in this situation? What is the ideal? And can I kind of find a way to get both?
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like there's almost three types of goals. There's one which is like Rama has set the goal, which is to live a life of dharma. And then all the goals kind of come underneath that. And then there's goals which are the other extreme, which are purely to achieve something for myself, identifying as this body, mind, and intellect. And then there's kind of goals which are in the middle, which are like, I want to achieve something for me and for the wider world, but not necessarily, it's all about how I behave and my dharma along the journey.
Yeah.
And I think when we read the Ramayana, I think that's what's so inspiring sometimes about, you know, the actions of so many of the characters, because they're not only trying to achieve something, but it's about how they achieve it and the messages and signals that they send and what the impact on that is on wider society for the upholdment of dharma. And I think that third category, I feel, is one that is so closely interwoven with Advaita Vedanta and knowledge, and that idea that we are all one. And so therefore, that's actually more important than any specific external achievement, whether that's, you know, for yourself or for yourself plus.
Yeah.
It feels like balance means different things to different people. Like what, you know, balance looks like in my life may look different in your life, may look, you know, different for various other people's life. So would you agree with that balance means different things for different people? And then maybe if you could share some examples from the Ramayana of different characters kind of achieving balance in different ways, perhaps.
Yeah. I guess you know, with the example of Shri Ram and the way that he reacts in that situation, balance there is really kind of maintaining that, just like mental equilibrium. Not being pulled too far in either direction of, you know, like being overjoyed or, you know, being sort of plunged into sorrow at things happening. So I guess internally, I would think that balance for each of us, like if we're thinking about balance in that way, then it's experienced the same for all of us. And it's an ideal, not because, you know, we don't want to experience those emotions, but it's an ideal, like balance is an ideal because when we are like experiencing those extreme highs and extreme lows, we almost, I guess it's almost a question of like losing control, right? And that we are then at the mercy of what's happening to us. And it becomes really hard then to take responsibility and remember that we have agency in every situation that we're in. And, you know, there are situations in which you can understand why it happens, because people face devastating loss. There are also like amazing things that happen to people, and it's natural for the mind to react in that way. But I guess it is, if we have a purpose to work towards, right? Like we were talking about at the beginning. And if that purpose has to be achieved, then can I afford to constantly be getting caught in these waves of emotion? if I want to kind of keep my focus and keep working towards my purpose. So I guess, yeah, to return to your question, balance in that sense would sort of be same for everyone. But I know we also talk about balance in terms of kind of, between the different aspects and areas of our life. What's the word? When we kind of, divide everything up and see everything as separate, then we think, okay, I need to balance this part of my life with that part of my life. I need to balance this relationship with that relationship. And if we have a kind of holistic vision of our life and of all of our relationships, then there isn't a need to develop balance, right? Like, for example, someone can, often there is this dilemma of how do I balance my work and home life?
Right.
Right. Like a lot of people find that they're either, not flourishing at work and things are going really well at home, or vice versa, like spending loads of time at work and things are going really well, but things are not going well at home. And so this question comes of like, how do I balance that? And again, I think it's actually the same solution. It's, can I see the overarching purpose that covers both and therefore act in both situations in a way that helps me fulfill that purpose,
right,
rather than thinking that they're separate. And if we bring it back to the Ramayana, then Ram is not thinking, okay, how do I balance my relationship with my father, with my responsibility to my mother, with my responsibility to the citizens? He's just thinking, how do I fulfill the dharma, right? Like, how do I just do the best that I can in this situation and fulfill my responsibility? And therefore, because he's taking the decision according to that, everything kind of falls into place.
The core concept of balance, as you're describing, that which allows you to achieve your duties and perform your duties and perform your dharma, that as a concept is the same, I think, is what I'm hearing what you're saying. But how that manifests for each individual person may be different. And we can maybe talk about that both in respect of Ramayana characters, but also real life examples. So like, for example, when I think about Ramayana, we think about a character like Shri Ram and what balance looks like in his life. And you take maybe a character like Hanumanji and you see what balance looks like for Hanumanji. I think the underlying concept of dharma and balance is the same for both. But actually, for Hanumanji, the way that manifests is very single pointed in respect of service to Shri Ram and I guess the family more broadly. And therefore that requires Hanuman to achieve balance in how he looks after his body and how he looks after his mind and how he controls his emotions and all of these things. But you could imagine a lot of people in society at that time who may look at Hanuman and say, well, you're a bit extreme, you did not really achieve much work-life balance. You're always working and serving this one particular cause. But for him, that's the cause. And so it's all about balancing the aspects of life to achieve that purpose and goal. And I think that comparison, I think, is something that I can relate to. It's very interesting that you brought up the kind of work-life balance, which I think is something that, obviously having, worked in a pretty, I'd say intense work atmosphere for the most of my career. This is a big topic is, how do you achieve work-life balance? And I think there's a lot of people who seem to sort of subscribe that there is a common work-life balance for everyone. But I think that's actually, balance can be common for everyone, but depending on what your purpose is, what you're serving, how you may choose to, use your hours and etc., can actually look quite different. So I think that kind of almost somewhat paradoxical, but I think quite helpful to recognize that rather than, feel that you need to be influenced by, say, societal expectations of what balance is, rather than something that's more connected with your vision and your purpose of life.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it's not like you're not thinking of, am I spending like an equal number of hours at work and at home, and therefore that's my balance? It's kind of, it's more that internal thing, right? Of am I doing everything to the best of my ability at work, but also then am I carrying that attitude home as well? And am I doing everything then? It's again, yeah, exactly. It's more like that internal thing that helps us to achieve balance rather than the sort of tangible measures of time or,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely. And I think it's a lot about, for me anyway, it's a lot about when you achieve balance well, it's about self-reflecting on what your actual duties are. And then you allocate time in line with those. And there's a kind of voice in the back of your head when you sort of know that you're not doing that. And then you kind of know you're out of balance. But at the same time, you know that balance looks like different things for different people because of that, different goals, different duties, etc. Maybe another practical question in terms of, so we talked about, you know, setting balance, like achieving balance and some of the ingredients that are helpful in there. What about challenges in maintaining balance? Maybe expand on that. What would you say, kind of in your experience, are some of the challenges that come up once you have achieved balance, but in terms of maintaining that balance?
What are the challenges in maintaining balance? I think it like we were talking about earlier, I think it's losing perspective very often. And I think that happens when we get very attached to like one thing over anything else. So for example, say I have a goal to, I don't know, like be more healthy, right? So then I want to make lifestyle changes. I want to exercise better. I want to eat better. I want to sleep better. And so I have to make various changes in the way that I live my life to achieve that balance. And so, you know, we start working towards those things, and say I start like going to the gym regularly and eating better and that kind of stuff, which is great, like making positive changes. But then I think, you know, we get kind of so set to the point that then I kind of, you know, someone is eating a piece of chocolate cake in front of me and I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing? Like, this is the worst possible thing for you. Like, you just completely lose perspective because one thing becomes everything, right? And we're unable to see that actually, you know, there are lots of different ways of doing things, and it doesn't require me to only live in one particular way and keep repeating the same actions over and over and over again, right? Like I have to keep evaluating what is required at every moment. So I think that the thing that, and again, it comes back to perspective, right? Like if I forget that, okay, health is important in life, but equally there are a lot of other things that are important. And if I start neglecting work for the sake of, I don't know, like spending 3 hours at the gym every day, or neglecting like personal relationships for the sake of, you know, eating healthily, then it's because I have lost perspective on a goal that originally seemed to be something that's good for me. But, you know, when we become so attached to something, then it can end up actually being something that harms us. So I think it is that that inability to see beyond kind of, you know, the short-term goals that we set ourselves, and the tendency of the mind to then kind of get stuck into whether it's routine or an attachment or, you know, just patterns that stops us from, or that becomes a challenge in like maintaining equipoise. Because then like if health that suddenly becomes everything, then say I, you know, have to spend a little bit more time at work one day, which means I can't get up early the next morning to go to the gym. Now suddenly my whole day is ruined, right? And it doesn't have to be that way because it's just one day. So I think that yeah, loss of perspective and the inability to see things objectively can be a really big challenge in maintaining like equanimity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing for me that I've always found really helpful in making some of these concepts real so that I can apply them in my life is to have examples and role models of people who I feel exemplify that, whether that's, you know, historical characters, as described in a text like Ramayana, or whether that's people I've seen in kind of my life. And so maybe I think my last question for you, I think, Shripriya ji, is, could you share some examples of people that you examples, people, characters arranged that you feel have demonstrated balance very well in how they live life and that provide you some inspiration?
It's a really good question. I feel like all my examples will be like very particular to the thing that I'm working towards in my life, and not necessarily like universally relevant. But I feel like that, there's one thing that I heard, which is kind of indicative of the balance or equanimity of mind that you develop as we kind of get more and more absorbed in like the teachings of Advaita. And that is the shift from every time something happens, you're like, oh my God, what? To then being able to be like, okay, so what? Right? Like, so what? This has happened. It's fine. I can move on from it. Right? So there is a shift from being like, just having like huge reactions to everything, to then being able to be like, okay, this has happened. It's fine.
Yeah.
I can move on.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm still really curious to pursue an example.
Who examples?
Even if it's not universally relevant. But I'm just curious because, like who in your mind do you find is, as you said, something that you're trying to pursue?
Yeah.
And
I guess just like our teachers, right? Like, I think they provide really great examples to all of us. So whether that's, like Puja Gurudev, Swami Chinmayananda, or any of the teachers in our lineage, I find when you read, their stories and you read about the way that they live their life, even like, when I, for example, personally, like when I read about the lives of saints, in different traditions, that's something that like really inspires me, because it's really interesting. Like I don't think there is a single, like person or like a saint or a devotee who I've read about who hasn't faced like incredible challenges. And yet they're always able to maintain their dedication, their devotion, their kind of steadfastness. Yeah.
Amazing. I'm glad you didn't ask me the same question in reverse, but I would have just said you, so that's fine.
I'll ask you off air.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. It's been great to reflect on this topic.
Thank you so much for today, Nikhil. It was a pleasure having you.
My pleasure.
Join us for the next episode. Hari Om.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Living Ramayana. To stay updated on Chinmaya Mission UK's activities, visit our website chinmayauk.org and follow us on social media. Subscribe to this podcast and join us for the next episode. Hari Om.